Hi, I'm Chess Life editor John Hartman, and today we're talking to John Burke, who is the winner of the U.S. Junior Championship this year. John, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Yeah, I know it's a few weeks after, but finally we were able to make it happen, and yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, yeah, I assume this is a pretty important win in your chess career. How does it feel to be the junior champion, even under these strange COVID circumstances?
Yeah, although obviously it's not the usual tournament that we've come to expect, I'm still very happy to have won it. And if you look at the games, I think the quality was in general pretty high among all of us, even though it was rapid and online. And of course, there were those rapid time control blunders that we've come to expect. I think we all did great under the circumstances, and it feels like a legitimate tournament win, not just a rapid win.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
How'd you go about preparing for this?
I didn't really prepare too much differently than I would for any other tournament. We all got the fields at least a month in advance, and the colors and pairings for our tournament we got, I think, about 2 weeks or maybe a little bit less in advance. So we had time to prepare for each other. And the only difference for me was when I played practice games or any training, I just did it online instead of over the board because it's obviously going to be an online event. And I tried to simulate the time control, which was 25 plus 5. But other than those two things, really, I approached it like I would any other tournament.
So when you prepare, usually do you work on like on a physical board, or do you work on the screen mostly with ChessBase?
Well, when I'm preparing openings or something like that, it's a lot more convenient to look at the computer screen.
Mhm.
It's a habit that I'm trying to get out of because, when you play over the board, sometimes it does feel a little bit different. And I think it's important to at least play some training games against other people in real life over the board, if that's possible, because sometimes your brain processes things differently on a 2D or a 3D screen.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of us are going to have some trouble going back to the meat world, so to speak, once we're done having to play everything online. But I guess time will tell. Let's take a look at the cross table. So let me see if I can share my screen. Okay. So there's the cross table from the main event, and we'll have to talk about the tiebreak in a moment. But yeah, so I mean, a great event for you. Only one loss to Jeffrey Zhang, and 5 wins to tie for first place in regulation. Did anything here surprise you at all, or did you have a sense that this was kind of what you expected in terms of placement?
Um, well, when I saw that Jeffrey and Sam were playing, well, first of all, I was very happy because normally they don't play this event. So to see them do it this year, I was very pleased that I got the chance to compete against them. And of course, there's no surprise that they would be towards the top of the cross table. I think, that was expected from the beginning. So overall, I wasn't too surprised by anything that happened during the tournament. I figured that if I was going to be in contention to win, then it would be those two right alongside we.
Makes sense. Yeah. Well, let's take a look at some of the games. I'm going to go back and we're going to share. Let's see if I can do this properly. Unlike in the video with your former coach Joel Benjamin, where we had to cut things. All right. So chess base. And can you see? You can see the game window now.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So we said we might start with the Sam Sevian game. Anywhere in particular you want to pick this up?
I guess right around when I played G4 and move 28.
Okay. So let's start here. So let's talk about this position and why you decided to play G4.
Yeah. So first of all, G4 is objectively it's not the right move here.
What do you think it is?
I should really just play slowly and not try to go directly for an attack. So even something like G3, for example, there's no reason for me to go directly for an attack because I have a very, very nice positional advantage at the moment. And I thought that when he played h6 that it was kind of provoking me to do this, and it's still very interesting. And he has to defend it pretty accurately in order to survive. But he could have defended it if he found a couple of ideas. So objectively, it wasn't correct, but maybe practically for a rapid game, it ended up working out.
I was about to ask you about that, because one of the things that I found really interesting when we spoke to Carissa Yip was the way that she talked about how the time control influenced some of her decisions, that that initiative takes on more importance. And maybe even if a move isn't entirely objectively correct, if it allows you to put pressure on your opponent in rapid, that's more of a reason to play it. Did you feel sort of the same way here?
Yeah, I do agree with that. That a lot of the times in rapid, it's just a lot easier to attack because if you're defending a very dangerous attack and you blunder, then you could lose immediately. Whereas if you're attacking and you make a mistake, then it might not be the end of the world.
Right.
And I wasn't, throughout this tournament, I wasn't really thinking in those terms. I was just trying to play the best move that I could find, regardless of psychology or anything like that. But yeah, I think that's definitely an important factor, and I think that was an important thing in this game in particular.
So yeah, so you did play G4, and Sam played Bishop E7, fairly logical, and now you played H5.
Yes.
Okay, H5, King G8.
So I will point out the idea behind H5. It looks a little strange to not play G5, but I thought G5, H5, and I wasn't too convinced about allowing him to close it like that. But I should have done this. I should play G6 and Knight G5, and it's pretty good for white. But at the time, I didn't really realize how strong this was.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, so, but you ended up playing G5 anyway after H5. So I guess, so H5 prevents the G5 idea, and now you play it anyway.
Yes.
Queen C8, Queen to A5. Sure, why not attack a rook?
Yeah, and here he had Queen G4, which is very, very difficult to calculate in a rapid game. I don't blame anyone for not playing this, but it turns out that this is working out for black. So if I take the rook, for example, the important thing here, which maybe is what he missed, he starts with Queen F4. He doesn't take the knight. And after King G2, Queen G4 check, King F1, now he can take the knight. And basically, he is going to get a lot of threats against my king, and in most lines he'll be able to deliver a perpetual.
Okay. So he could have bailed out here and he could have saved the game. But
yes.
Yeah, this is definitely not something. I mean, do you recollect how much time you guys had at this point? Were you?
I can't imagine that we had a lot more than like 10 minutes. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, very. I mean, hard to calculate in regular time control, but here,
Yeah.
understandable.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
you said Rook B8, Queen A2. And now the computer here gives, as the only move, something again very hard to see, this move D5.
Yeah, I think this is just very difficult to understand in any time control. And
Yeah.
for someone to, because first of all, you not only have to see that D5 works, you have to understand that King H8 is so bad for black. So to find D5 here is really, it's a tall order, I think.
Yeah. So the line would be something like E takes D5, and now you have to play King H8 to get out of the discovered attack. And after he takes the pawn, you play E4. And the computer says there's counterplay, but we're not made of silicon, so
Yeah.
hard to say. But yeah, King H8 looks entirely logical, but it turns out this is just trouble. And so you decided to open the G file and take it with Rook G1. And all of a sudden, this doesn't look very good for black.
Yeah, my pieces are just invading. I have queen f7 coming and rook g6, and it's just very difficult for him to hold. I don't think it's objectively completely hopeless yet. Like after queen f8, queen e6, I think here he has to play like rook b2 or something, and he's kind of holding on, but it still looks very, very difficult for him.
Yeah.
Um,
But as the game went, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say queen f4 has happened in the game, rook g3, and it's already lost at this moment.
And after queen f6, even trading queens here, your initiative just it's too much to handle.
Yeah, my pawns are very secure. That the only way he can go after them is rook b8, rook b2, but that takes too long. So he's forced to play rook b1 to get behind my h pawn, but it's just pretty easily winning.
Yeah. So very nice technique here, especially given that it's a rapid game. And yeah, there's not much he can do.
Yeah, he can play rook takes h6 instead of rook g1, but I just take and then play knight f7, and basically all his pawns are going to fall.
That looks pretty convincing, yeah. Yeah, but as the game ended after rook a7, this is, yeah, not too much hope. So let's take a look at a couple of the other games. So this is one of the games you mentioned, and I had asked if maybe we could talk about the game against Brandon. So your round 8 game, and I kind of wanted to talk. I wanted to pick up the position here, if that's okay. After Brandon's 21st move.
Okay.
This h5 move, which turns out may not be the strongest. So let's talk about this position. Did Brandon have something better here? How were you feeling right about here?
Well, I was definitely feeling very comfortable at this point. It's very hard for him to play. His immediate worry is his king side. It's very, very close to collapsing completely. If he loses his g4 pawn, then my pieces are going to flood in. And yeah, he played h5, which I guess is just too much to allow my queen to come into g5.
Right.
But I wasn't really sure what else he would do at this point. I don't remember if what the computer says here that he should do instead. Maybe knight takes e5 and queen f5 is possible. But yeah, I was comfortable regardless. I felt like I have a good position here.
Okay, so after h5, so you took on d7, and then you played queen to g5, and yeah, all of a sudden those kingside weaknesses are beginning to be pretty prominent. So bishop e6, you remove the guard and take the pawn, and after f5, the reason I wanted to look at this game is that this knight on h2 looks pretty sad right now, but you found a lot of ways to reroute it and get it back where it needs to be.
Yeah.
So knight to f1,
Yes.
queen to e7, and now bishop to c4, a nice move, exploiting the pin. Queen to f6, bishop to b3, rook to d6.
Yeah, and I think this is the moment where I began to give it away a little bit. I should basically just start with rook ad1 here.
Okay.
And he plays rook ad8, I assume. And then I can take rook takes d6, rook takes, and then bishop takes e6. And the reason this is the right moment to play this is if he ever takes with the f pawn, I can play queen e8 and get my queen out of this kind of jail that was in.
Got it.
And it's not immediately over, but I'm up a healthy pawn, and I should be able to win this game from here.
So yeah, so instead you went queen to g5. What was your thinking here?
Well, I was sort of nervous, and I wanted to get my queen out of there and clarify things because, um, I figured I'd still be up a pawn in the endgame, but this is being a bit too complacent, because the way it happened after he took and played king h7, he was very close to just being completely fine here, because my knight on f1, it's going to come into the game to attack his f5 pawn, but his king's coming to defend it. So it's really just a matter of if I can consolidate and maintain my extra pawn. So I have to play f4 here because he's going to play king g6. He took. Yeah, rook a8 is fine. King f2. King g6 is fine too, I think. f4. And now it's not entirely obvious that rook b6 is not correct, but his better plan here was to play with b5. I think immediately b5.
Okay, and the idea being?
He just wants to play b4.
Okay.
He's attacking my pawns.
Right.
And I don't think I even have much of any advantage here. So this definitely would have made it very difficult to win.
Okay. Yeah, so instead he played rook to b6.
Yeah, he might have missed rook e2. I'm not sure.
Okay, rook e2.
And the point is, if he takes on b3 and a takes b3, he doesn't have time to play rook takes b3 because of the a7 pawn.
Right. Okay. So yeah, so bishop f8 it is. And now you exchange on e6. Double up.
Yep.
And now this is this knight that again finds ways to get back into it. So knight to h2.
Yeah, and
d6.
I'm just in time to bishop d6, and I'm just in time to get everything under control with king g3, and my knight also comes to f3. Like for example, if he plays rook g8, I'm in time to play knight f3 to cover my pawn. And I knew that once I got my knight to f3 and clamping down on the e5 square that he's completely busted.
Yeah. So in the game you played bishop to c7, knight comes to f3. As you say, you are controlling some key squares. Rook to d3, rook to h1, and now the h file becomes very important. And yeah, it's not great here for him.
Yeah, I'll also note that towards the end of this game, he was in very big time trouble. So that kind of added to his troubles because it's very difficult to defend when I'm coming to the H file. It's already probably lost at that point, but it definitely doesn't make his life any easier.
Yeah. Rook to e7.
And yeah, I'm threatening rook h6 mate, so he has to take on f4, but the checks run out within a couple moves.
And that's it. Nicely done. Nice way to get a key win. And so going into round 9, were you tied with Jeffrey for the or what was the tournament situation?
I was half a point behind.
Okay, so you had to win. And
yeah, and he was playing white against Bryce, and I figured that basically for me a loss and a draw would be the same thing. I didn't see any point of trying to play safely. I just had to go for it.
And yeah, and so I mean, again, we can look at the opening if you like, but we can also get to the sort of key position where I when I was playing through these games before we got on the video, yeah, I was really impressed by the way you handled this position after move 27.
Can we start on move 18?
Sure, absolutely.
We also flip the board, by the way.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's black to move here. Black. You want to look at your move 18?
Yeah, sure. So after queen c2. Okay. So yeah, this position is a little bit difficult for me to handle. The main problem is I can't castle because of knight takes e5. And this has been bothering me for, well, actually here I have rook c8 maybe. Maybe at this moment, maybe instead of knight takes e5, he has queen c7. this might have been the specific problem here. But basically, for a couple moves, I've been having to deal with knight takes e5 ideas, and in this case, queen c7 is here. So I have to find a way to gain time to do that. So that's why I played knight g4.
That makes sense.
And then, yeah, after he plays knight f1 to defend f2, then I played king d7 here. And the point is, he doesn't have time to play h3 because I play rook c8 in reply. And yeah, it's bad news for him.
So yeah, so he plays queen to e2 instead.
Yeah, to get out of rook c8, and then I play rook c8 anyway, and I've been able to get my rook out. So I thought that was an interesting idea, this knight g4 and king d7.
That is, yeah, definitely. I did not see how important that was, but not surprising given that, you're a grandmaster and I'm not. So yeah, the rooks come off, h3, knight f6, knight to e3, g6, holding f5.
Yeah, his position is fine here, but it's a little tricky to play because I do have the bishop pair here, and he has to deal with the e4 pawn, and it's not easy for him to play active moves. He has to wait, and he was also taking quite a lot of time around here. So I knew that once he was getting really low on time, then it was possible for him to blunder something, which happened in the end.
Yeah, so we'll get to the key position. So knight d2, bishop b7, queen c2, king f8, king f1, which is one of those imperceptible mistakes.
Yeah, it's one of those times where he's just trying to make a move. And that's what happens in a position like this. Sometimes, you just have to pick a move, and it turns out that tactically, this king on f1 becomes a big problem.
Yeah, so now you play queen to d4. So, okay, just attacking the loose bishop and also putting pressure on e4. Bishop to c3. I mean, really the only move you can play. And now queen to c5 with the idea of b4 using the pin. So he has to stop it with b4. And now you play queen to c6. And now you've got three pieces attacking the pawn on e4. So yeah, just a really nice sort of series of moves that allows you to improve your position and get your pieces very active. After f3, you played an incredibly logical move. The computer prefers knight to h5, but that doesn't, well, I don't know. I mean, the computer knows everything, but
yeah,
I think bishop d8 here makes a lot of sense because you're rerouting. I mean, your piece that is doing the least and getting it on those dark squares. I mean, why wouldn't you do this?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember what the computer was saying here, but during the game, I felt like this had to be the correct move. Yeah. Because, once I get my pieces into the game, and especially the bishop on b6 is very, very powerful, and he just has to worry about his king all the time, and his pieces aren't coordinated at all. I was very happy here.
Yeah. So queen to d3, bishop to b6, knight to b3. Okay, and now knight to h5. And then as it turns out, he made a mistake here, although his position is really under a lot of pressure as it is. Knight to a5. Yeah. Go ahead.
He should play probably knight d5 here.
Knight d5.
Which is why I think knight h5 might not have been the best move, actually. But I was getting a little bit too excited, and he had like 30 seconds left or something. So I really wanted to just continue making threats on every move. But yeah, here I think the computer wants me to play knight g3 check, king e1, f5. I'm only maybe marginally better here, but I still think it's a nightmare to defend for white.
Yeah, one of those positions that like Gelfand in the new book says, well, maybe the computer says it's not winning, but everybody knows which side they would take.
Yeah,
I think this is definitely one of those positions. So instead of knight d5, though, he played knight to a5, and as it turns out, there's just this is just a blunder because of bishop takes, pawn takes, and now b4. And the idea is that this guy's under attack and bishop a6 is coming.
Yeah, b4 is a pretty easy idea to miss because you could assume that I'm just going to play knight f4 next and then look at knight f4, queen d2, and then start calculating.
Right.
Because my last move was knight h5, so he's just assuming that next I'm going to play knight f4. But yeah, b4 is winning.
Yeah, nice move. And really, again, just if anybody watches this will be in our Wednesday workouts for tomorrow on uschess.org because this queen repositioning is just so lovely, and it'll make a nice problem for our readers. So you already know the answer if you're watching this video. Congratulations. Anyway, so this got us to the end of the regulation tournament, and both you and Jeffrey Zhang were tied at 6.5, and of course that meant tie breaks. So you had lost to Jeffrey in the first round in a very long game. What were you thinking heading into the playoff?
Well, because to be honest, before the last round, I wasn't expecting to even get into a playoff. I was very happy to be there to begin with. So obviously, I really wanted to win, but even if I had lost, I was telling myself that I would still be happy with the tournament. So I was kind of playing for free in a way. I just wanted to do my best.
Well, let's take a look at the games. I don't know how much time we're going to spend on them because they were, what was the time control for the first ones was what?
10+2.
Okay, so a little faster than the other games. So in the first game, let me flip this around.
So I had a lot of trouble adjusting to the 10+2. It might not seem like a big difference to just go from 25-5 to 10+2, but for me, I really, you can see in this game that right out of the opening, like knight takes e5, queen e7, d6. Yeah, and at this moment, first of all, I couldn't really remember anything here. I'd actually prepared this opening for a different player in this tournament, but not for Jeffrey. So I was surprised to get this on the board against Jeffrey, and then once it happened, I couldn't really remember anything. And the knight c4 is the move, of course, here. And there's a few games here, but basically I was telling myself it's more important to make a move quickly than invest a minute or two trying to understand everything that's going on here. And and sometimes that makes sense to just get on with it if two moves are of roughly equal value. But the problem here in this case is that knight c4 is just a lot better than knight f3. Yeah,
so you played knight f3, and then...
Yeah, it's just a bad position for white. I'm already trying to equalize.
Yeah. So why is it so bad? Just because of the bishop pair, or because of the central pawns, or all of it?
Basically both. And it's maybe at first glance it doesn't look that bad. And I'm not, much worse or anything, just a little bit. But the problem is his plan is pretty simple. He's gonna do what he did basically. He's gonna he puts his knight in the center. He played f6 and king f7, which is a nice move to keep his king secure. And then he just plays a5, a4, and it's really a matter of the bishop pair here, and his double pawns on c6 and c5. I will argue that they are a strength here rather than a weakness, because they they support his d5 knight, and the pawn on c5 controls some important squares in the center. And I have nothing to do here other than react to whatever he's throwing at me.
Yeah, so let's see. So knight e4. Stop me at any time if there's something that we should be looking at.
Sure, yeah. So knight b6. I'm able to get rid of one of his bishops at least. Rook e2, a3. I should throw in rook a e1 before bishop c1 after a3.
Okay, so
this is just a slight improvement, because
Yeah,
if he defends or moves his bishop, then I can play bishop c1 afterwards without having to uh, trap my rook on a1.
got it. Bishop c1. Yeah. C3.
Yeah, knight takes d3, bishop takes a3, and now bishop takes c3 is still good for him, but c4 was even better. And it's not easy to really appreciate how strong this move is until you start looking at what my move is. Because first of all, if I take on d6, which looks like a free pawn, then he plays c5 here. And my bishop is basically getting trapped. I have to go to g3, and then he plays f4. So it's a really funny line where my bishop travels from c1 to a3 and then to g3 at the end.
Interesting. Yeah, c4. Not a move you immediately look at, but
Yeah, he's just playing against my knight on a4 and my bishop on a3. He's gonna follow up. Probably he can play c5 himself. He can play rook b8, and my knight on a4 is so stuck. I can't do anything. It's really bad for me.
luckily he didn't play it. Well, luckily for you anyway. So bishop takes, knight takes, and now.
Yeah, and now knight b1 is I want to say saving idea, although I'm still not doing particularly great after this. But I had seen this from a few moves ago, and I saw that I was at least winning the pawn back here. Yeah, I have to play this really awkward move, rook b2. It's the only way to stop knight b3. And again, he still is building up an advantage here. So knight d2, rook a8, and my rooks are tied down to my a2 pawn, and I knew that at some point I'm more than likely going to have to give it up in order to get some sort of counterplay. The problem is, like, instead of f4, for example, if I play rook b6 here, I thought that he would take on a2, takes, and if rook takes c6, then knight e4. So I just couldn't find a good moment to abandon this pawn. So yeah, and f4 is gaining some space, but it's also creating weaknesses. And in fact, at some moment, I think he was really clearly winning if he didn't play, like, rook a3 is fine, g3, and just here he has to take a step back for a moment and realize that that my next move is not entirely clear, and he can play any improvement move, such as h5, h4, for example. It doesn't really matter what he plays as long as he keeps me in a bind here. Yeah. But I mean, knight a4 to play knight c3, it's very, very obvious and natural, and I don't blame him for doing it, but it's a little bit surprising that it becomes very playable for me within a couple of moves.
So he picks up the pawn. And now rook to b6, so you get a little bit of counterplay now.
Yeah, and he couldn't find a way to continue pressing forward here. I think he can play like knight e4, for example, and if I take knight takes e4,
That's
pawn
right.
takes.
Yeah, don't want to hang anything.
Yeah, rook takes c6. Then he plays king f5. And if I take on d6, then he can play e3 with the idea king e4, king f3. So he definitely could have, if he had seen this idea, continued playing on, but I think he couldn't see what to do.
Yeah. So you ended up repeating moves and moving on to the second game where he had white, and you ended up defending very curious. This Queen H4 move, is this book? Is this?
I think it is. I knew that it's a common idea. At the time, I wasn't, you know, particularly knowledgeable about the specifics of the theory here, but I knew a little bit about the ideas here for black.
So Queen to E2, Bishop to E3.
Yeah, so we kind of get into an endgame quickly here. And then, yeah, this is all normal. Yeah, and F5 is just a bad move here. I was getting a little bit too impulsive to clarify the position as quickly as I can. In a rapid game, sometimes that's one of the pitfalls. You just want to immediately exchange pieces or try to get an endgame on the board that is easy to evaluate. But in this case, it was wrong because after what he played with King F2, or King D2, sorry, then the problem is if I ever take on E4, either here or on the next move, and then Bishop takes, then both my C6 and H7 pawn are hit, so I have no time to do this, which means that F5 was not the brightest idea to begin with.
Got it. Yeah, so instead, you played rook over.
And then, yeah, F4 is a very ugly move, but as I was thinking here, I realized that I don't have a lot of alternatives because if I don't play F4, then he's threatening to just take on F5, and I can't take that because rook takes E8 and then Bishop takes F5 and I lose a piece. And if I play something like G6, then I thought at the very least he could play still E takes F5, Bishop takes, rook takes E8, rook takes, Bishop takes F5, G takes, and like rook H4 with the idea of going to A4 and going after my pawns there. And he might have even a better line than this, but once I saw this, I wanted no part of it.
So yeah, so F4 it is. Yeah, it's a very interesting move.
It's a move born out of necessity. I obviously don't want to undouble his pawns like that, but I think that was close to my only move there.
So E5, okay, G6, and he undoubles your pawns.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing too because he's weakening my pawns a little bit. I guess it's a little bit easier for him to attack my D pawn and now, for example, and he's opening the file. But it's debatable if this was best for him because I began to gradually improve my position here. I traded a pair of rooks. King F7. Yeah, and now is the critical moment after rook F4. Rook E4 is important because I have to decide if I'm going into this endgame or not, and it's impossible to know for certain at the beginning if it's a draw or a loss. So I had to just go with my instinct, and I decided I would try and hold it. Yep, C4, F4, and now is the only moment where I gave him a chance to get a winning position. And it's funny because I saw afterwards that this was the one moment that Yasser and all the commentators were saying that I have to play H6. And it turns out that this is not a good move. And it's very natural because my bishop is on E8. I'm preparing to play H6 and G5 to get my pawns off of light squares. But if I just sit here and wait, the computer says it's a draw. I can play any move. I don't know, like King E7, for example. But it's still a lot of suffering for me. And I thought H6 was the right plan. But the reason that this is incorrect is not that easy to understand in a rapid game. So the point is he plays a4 here. And there's a couple of ideas. The first is if I ever play c5 check, and then he takes, king takes c5, bishop takes a4, then my g6 pawn is hanging. This is why it makes a difference.
Okay.
Because otherwise I always have this c5 resource. And as well, after a4, if I continue with g5, which is my normal plan, then he plays b5. And there's a bunch of lines here. I don't want to go too much into it, but one of the ideas is if I take on b5, then he keeps the move f5 check in reserve. So he plays f5 here, and then he plays c takes b5, and it's an easy win.
So what, king f6 or?
Yes, for example, king f6, and then takes b5, and I can't deal with his incoming pass pawn on a5, b6, as well as the f pawn. He'll eventually force something through.
Got it.
But he played c5, which is completely natural. This is a very normal move. But after g5, although I was very nervous the rest of the game, it turns out that he, at no moment was it lost for me. So we can just keep going until, I guess, move 44 is when the last interesting moment.
Okay. And move 44 for you or for him?
Actually, maybe a little bit past that. Let me see. So king e4, yeah, bishop d7. Yeah, this moment. So the only thing I had to be concerned about is he can play b5 here to try and tactically force his way through. But it's still a draw. So I play c takes b5, c6, and then probably bishop e6 is the most accurate. And if he takes on b5, then I have time to play king d8 and get his pawn under control, and I'm okay here. So if he plays c7 instead of a takes b5, then b takes a4, and if he makes a queen, then my a pawn is going, so he's losing here.
Right.
And if he doesn't make a queen there and plays like king d4 to control the pawn, then he'll eventually queen his pawn and win my bishop, but I have enough pawns and it's a draw afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. But bishop a6 instead, and then, as you say, that was the last really sort of important moment, you think?
Yeah, and then eventually at some point it was a threefold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we get to the key game, the Armageddon game. And so there was a story here. I read that you made a point of turning on pre-move. Is that what happened?
Well, for the other rapid games, and for the 9 main ones in the tournament, I just didn't have them on because I wanted to avoid some accidental pre-move. Like I'm reminded of Kasparov's game against Caruana in one of those recent tournaments where he accidentally pre-moved something and ended up losing a piece. I just wanted to avoid anything like that happening.
So yeah, this is a long game. It's almost 90 moves. So where should we pick it up?
Well, I guess, I don't know, on move, where is this? So on move 40, maybe. We don't have to go through the rest. So yeah, I'm in a rook endgame on down a pawn, and earlier in the game, because it was 5 minutes for him, 4 for me, and no increment, normally in an Armageddon, you want to play fast to even up the times, but the problem for me was I was playing quite badly in the opening, and I had to invest time to make sure that I wasn't losing immediately. And as a result, the clock times, the gap widened between us rather than narrowed, which is normally what the player with black wants to do. They want to narrow the gap, but it widened a little bit, and I think I was down a minute 15 on the clock or something like that.
Wow.
But yeah, after rook c2, it's just a winning rook endgame for him, a pawn up. But he blundered with b4, rook c4, and then after this, I'm winning his h4 pawn, and things got pretty crazy afterward. At this point, it should be objectively a draw, but there's no way for us to play this accurately.
Mm.
I was just trying to make active moves with my rooks at some point. Yeah, because it looks like I'm close to coordinating some sort of perpetual, but his king is always running away from my rooks. Yeah, and he ends up winning my a7 pawn, and my rooks look good, but g3 from him is a very, very accurate move because he gives his king a place to hide on g2. And then I'm just trying to create counterplay as best I can. I was realizing that the position was obviously becoming objectively lost for me, but I realized that I just had to create counterplay and play quickly, basically.
Yeah, and especially without increment, this has just got to be nerve-wracking.
Yeah, for sure. The only I guess plus thing for me is that it's a lot easier for me to play. He has to always worry about if I'm getting some sort of perpetual mechanism with my rooks, whereas all I have to do is keep creating threats and keep checking. But yeah, he evades all of the checks, and then of course he's queening and he's winning. But the problem for him was he had to spend so much time figuring out how to avoid all of my checks that ended up leaving him with no time at the end. So he wasn't able to make it.
Yeah, and so with this, with your win in the Armageddon game, you ended up becoming the U.S. Junior Champion. Not too shabby for 3 days of work?
Yeah.
So let's stop sharing. Let's stop sharing the screen. There we go. So yeah. So what is next for you now? I mean, obviously, there's probably not a lot of tournaments to be played at this point, at least over the board. But where is chess taking you right now?
Yeah. So as you said, I'm not aware of any over the board tournaments coming up, but my next one is going to be the Pan Ams, which they're doing online this year, as they've moved a lot of tournaments online. This is kind of one of them. So I'm going to be preparing for that, and afterwards, I'm not sure exactly.
One of the things, and we spoke about this with your former coach Joel Benjamin. There have been a lot of very complimentary things being said about you by some of America's top players. Sam Shankland, in his interview with the Chess Dojo, he talked about how he thought you sort of got a bum rap in the chess press, so to speak, because of your meteoric rise when you were about 12 years old because of the K factor in the FIDE ratings. And he said he thought a lot of people sort of wrote you off at that point as being, just a product of this rating system. But he said every time he looked at your games, he was always very impressed that there were always lots and lots of ideas. And, Shanklin doesn't give out compliments very easily like that. So that was kind of a nice thing to hear. And then Joel, of course, when we spoke to him, he said from the first time he met you, he was just impressed by your seriousness and by your ability to look at all sorts of ideas in any position. How do you think that improvement took place? A lot of people who are watching this now, almost 50 minutes in, maybe they're wondering how they can get to play like you. I mean, what was it for you that got you so good?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate Sam and Joel saying those things. I did see Sam's comments, and very appreciative of them. And Joel, of course, was my coach for over 5 years, up until at least I became an IM. So to hear that from him also means a lot. So how I improved, I don't know. I think most of it was just being invested in the game, whether it was um, watching high level games, playing playing Blitz online, reading books. Um, just the key is really to immerse yourself in it and love it. Doing tactics, basically anything. If you're doing anything chess related, I think it cannot be bad. And I know that's a lot of people will say you should do, this many tactics a day, study these games or anything like that. I don't know exactly if there's a formula like that, but what I can say is if you're looking at a chessboard, if you're thinking about chess, then you're definitely on the right track. I know that's not the most profound answer, and that people might be looking for more specific advice, but that's really what I believe. That if you love the game, if you're playing it, if you're you know just investing yourself in it, then you'll improve.
Yeah, my friend and my former coach John Watson said almost the same thing. He said, uh, people are always asking what end game book is best. He said, look, if you find one that you like and that you read and that you get invested in, it almost doesn't make a difference what it is, so long as you sink yourself into it and really pick it up. But we should talk about books. Being the former review editor of the magazine, I always am interested in what books you have read that were really important to you, and what books you're reading right now, if any.
So definitely my favorite chess books ever are Kasparov's, my great predecessors. Um, just because I'm a huge fan of chess history and reading about that stuff and being able to see the way the game progressed from, since it was basically created to today is really really instructive, and I definitely recommend that to anyone. I think that can um, be appealing to anyone who wants to just learn about chess history, see some interesting games. I think those books are great for all audiences. And right now, I'm not reading as many books, probably as I should be.
You're in school. I mean, that's to be expected.
Yeah, but uh, I guess I'll have to plug my coach Joel's book, my former coach Joel's book. He wrote a couple of really good books recently. I think one of them is called Liquidation on the Chessboard,
Yep.
or something like that. It's about end games, and if people listening are looking for a good book, then they can go pick that one up.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Grandmaster John Burke, the new 2020 U.S. Junior Champion, thank you so much for your time. And if you've made it this far, you can check out John's story, I hope, in the January issue of Chess Life, where he'll talk about his tournament experience. John, thank you so much.